All right. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us here today with the eTourism Summit's See Tomorrow Conversation Series. It's been a fantastic bi-weekly series, really focusing on what is coming down the path in the world of digital tourism marketing. And again, we're thrilled to have an amazing panel here today, really kind of teeing up what's gonna be coming down the pike in September at the eTourism Summit in Las Vegas, and really focusing on kind of the future of tourism marketing and really leaning into the trends and technologies that are going to evolve as we move forward. And I'm thrilled today to have some great partners with Crant that have really stepped up with the eTourism Summit and quite honestly have taught me so much about machine learning and what the capabilities are and how we can use that in destination marketing, and really prompted a lot of really cool conversations. So right now I'm really excited to turn over to Maurizio and Michael, great partners with Crant, as well as a good friend and a board member of eTourism Summit, Ed Harris, and give you guys give you the floor, and I'll hop back in here a little bit later and participate in the conversation about halfway through. So with that, Maurizio, Michael, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Will. Thank you so much. As I share my screen, there we go.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah. And we'll get to introducing Ed, our very special guest, in just a moment. So yeah, thanks everyone for being here. As Will mentioned, we are Crant. We're a creative machine learning company. And our goal basically is to help companies and organizations capitalize on their data. And this comes in many different forms. We try to put it into three main buckets, although as we know, this can differ from company to company. The first is digital transformation programs. So this is primarily when organizations are trying to kind of develop themselves, transition into a more digitally oriented space. And so we have a couple of different flavors of this. We're not going to get too deep into this, but obviously if you're interested in any of this, you can reach out to us. Brand intelligence tools. I'm not going to harp on this because this is the focus of our conversation today. So skipping over to data science solutions, these are kind of more custom made tools that implement either machine learning, artificial intelligence to solve very specific problems. And these are very tactical. They use at that point a lot of first party data and third party data. So those are also very interesting. For the focus of today, we're going to talk about brand intelligence tools, which relates very closely, obviously, to what we're here to discuss, right? Which is how machine learning can generate data-driven branding, storytelling, and content for DMOs. And that's why we're super excited to have Ed with us today. Giving you a quick intro of myself, I'm the Director of Business Analytics. Mike is the Director of Data Science. And I'm just going to let Ed introduce himself because he does a great job of it. And we can start talking about what makes Lancaster, right?
Great. Well, first off, thank you for having me. Pleasure for me to be here. Quick background on myself. I spent the first 15 years or so of my career in brand development roles. After working with a startup footwear and apparel company, I moved on to Converse, the sneaker company. From there, I joined Timberland, the boot company. From there, I went to Under Armour, the sports apparel and footwear brand. And then my last stop prior to joining the nonprofit tourism industry was with eBay. And so I was fortunate to be in a world where it was super creative. When I talk about the footwear and apparel industry with products coming out on a seasonal basis, and then also at eBay, just seeing the importance of advantage when you're testing new technologies and seeing really the convergence of marketing with tech. And so prior to joining Discover Lancaster, I spent the last 6 years as the Chief Marketing Officer with the Valley Forge Tourism and Convention Board. And last summer 2020, in the midst of the pandemic, I joined Discover Lancaster, Pennsylvania as the president and CEO. And again, I'm just really happy to be here.
Yeah, thanks so much, Ed. And yeah, we've gotten to know Ed pretty well, and really his background is so impressive, first of all, and second of all, is crucial to what we're discussing, right? Which is branding. He has very, very deep experience in that, and it's really interesting how this can then transition over to the DMO space, right, Ed? And so what we kind of want to discuss today, just to kick off the conversation, is what makes Lancaster Lancaster, right? Let's talk about that, and then I think we can use that to propel our conversation later on. We did forget to mention, though, that Ed has a hard stop halfway through this call, so we want to make the most of the time we have with him in this first part. So yeah, if you could just walk us through like what makes Lancaster tick, I guess.
Sure, I would be happy to. And I guess it makes sense to first mention where Lancaster County is located. And so we are roughly 90 minutes from Center City, Philadelphia, going west from Philadelphia. We're also 90 minutes from Baltimore. So we like to consider ourselves the perfect retreat for those who want to get away from the city. And we really offer sort of the perfect blend between the old world and the new world. And if you know anything about Lancaster County, many people know us for the Amish culture that does exist here in part of our county and the attributes of their plain life, which people from around the world love to visit this beautiful rolling farmland and get a peek into the captivating, simple lifestyle of our Amish neighbors. And I say old world and new world because in addition to this quiet, beautiful scenery of rolling farmland across the countryside, we offer lots of recreational opportunities, vibrant small towns, including a downtown Lancaster, which has a thriving art scene, theaters, outlet shopping. We even have a minor league baseball team here in Lancaster. And we've in recent years become well known for our seed to table restaurant scene, which being sort of an agricultural community, you can imagine just the fresh food and the ice cream coming from our dairy farms is second to none. So to kind of wrap up an overview of the destination, I would sum it up by saying it's both simple and progressive. It's comfortable yet upscale, hearty, sophisticated, and quiet and energetic all at the same time.
Thanks so much. Yeah, and it's I can't wait to visit. The way you describe it makes it really interesting. It's a meld. It's a mix of all these different aspects, right? And I think that's something that we can see reflected in a lot of DMOs, right? I don't know, in your previous experience, I'm sure a lot of the people watching today, they're representing locations that have a variety of different components, right? We're not just one thing. And so that's something that becomes tricky to deal with, right? From a branding perspective, because you have all these different selling points and you need to figure out what's the best way to put your brand forward, right?
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, there's, even coming from Valley Forge, which is just on the edge of Philadelphia, it's an awesome destination. Lots of things to do in addition to that rich Revolutionary War history and George Washington that history buffs flock to go to see. And they have, the most amazing premium mall in the United States. And so there's all these different things that as a destination we can promote and talk about, but we all have, certain amount of money to spend in terms of the budget. And, I think it's these new emerging technologies and data that we can dig into that can help us be a little bit more strategic in our industry and help us focus in on promoting the things that really matter, that the data can speak to. And just to kind of elaborate a little bit more on our destination, in addition to sort of the beauty of the area that a lot of people from the cities and even beyond Philadelphia and Baltimore, people from New York and Washington, D.C. like to visit here as well because of the beauty, but also, when you talk about the range of things, there's quite a bit of vineyards, there's golf here, there's railroad history, covered bridges, hot air balloon rides, and it goes on and on. And, I think relying on partners to help us prioritize what's really clicking with the audience is really important. And just knowing what the emerging technologies are that can help, make us a little bit more accurate in our approach. And then I'll also say real quick, just in terms of how do you leverage people that may be well known that have come from the destination. We have people like Ken Jennings, who won over 60 episodes in a row on Jeopardy, all the way to somebody like Matt Nagy, who's the head coach of the Chicago Bears NFL team, and lots of other types of people. And so, being able to dig in and know, what matters to people is something that really interests me in this whole new chapter of machine learning and really digging in to have it help impact strategy.
Yeah, I think that's a great point and a great segue, right? That's really where data and machine learning can help us, specifically DMOs who, as you've mentioned, have a wide range, right? It's not just one thing. We're not a single product company. We have a wide range of things to offer people that can help them have a good time, right, when they come visit. And so then it becomes also a matter for DMOs of, okay, that's great, but where do I get the data and where do I get the processing to actually track this, make sense of it? And that's where like machine learning, and as you mentioned, can start coming into the mix. So I think that's the perfect segue, because that's really the biggest problem that we're facing in general is trackability and making data actionable, right? And I think, Ed, you can attest to this with your prior experience in kind of like consumer retail. Campaign performance and measuring paid media, that's come a long way, right? With social media and all these different platforms that give you native solutions for actually tracking that. But we are finding more and more that the opposite is true for brand performance. Sure, there are some tools here and there, but in terms of collecting all this data and giving us something that's truly unique and allows us to kind of show our audience how different we are from our competition, that's what's missing. And I don't know if you want to speak to that a bit from your prior experience.
Yeah, it's a really good topic. I mean, there's kind of two schools of thought in the sense that, you can have amazing creative or think you have great creative, and then you learn after doing a campaign what those results are. Whereas I think there's sort of a shift now where, because of these advanced tools, rather than waiting to see how the performance is, we can have a little bit more of a crystal ball, knowing how upfront that may perform better, because we can look at all this data and really pinpoint what should be showing up in those creative approaches. And whether it's, looking at how people are responding to certain imagery being posted on social media or your website, or even being able to make sense of all the different comments that might be coming in through review sites and your own social media channels. There's just so much more collective intelligence that I think is a huge opportunity for our industry to use, to be able to see that return on the creative campaigns we're spending on.
Yeah, definitely. And I remember you gave us the example of like the A/B testing for a website, right? You can check whether the red sweater or the blue sweater will perform better. And that's where kind of those things and those principles can start being applied to the brand, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that was a big part of what I kind of lived through in that brand development world in the sneaker and apparel industry, and then really at eBay, in the sense that you can go with your gut, and you and some people around your team may think it's the right approach, but if you're armed with actual knowledge and feedback and some of these tools, it takes the gut work out of it, and it can be a lot more precise and strategic in what you're actually putting out there. And there's a lot more thought that can go behind decision making on connecting with the audience. And that was an example I in previous conversations I gave, where we were working with different retail clients of eBay's and helping to guide them in terms of which version of a sweater should be featured, even though maybe offered in several different colors, which is the color that people are clicking on the most and gravitating to. And that really is important because, especially in that e-commerce world where you're trying to sell goods, it's a little bit different here in the travel and tourism world. However, there are definitely important parallels. So I don't know if I'm answering your question, but
no, yeah, definitely. And yeah, that I think we need to find where those parallels are and action on them. And that's kind of what we've done here. So what we're going to present to the audience today, with the help of Ed's kind of explanation of Discover Lancaster and then some other examples that we have tucked away, is first a brand model. And so this is kind of just a structure on how we can interpret not just our brands, but any brand, and understand what makes them tick, right? This structure is based on data and machine learning, kind of this research and work with clients that we have done. And it's designed to allow for this kind of trackable brand differentiation and relevance. So it allows us to understand what is our brand, what is composing our brand, and how can we measure those changes in our brand relative to our competition. And obviously, a lot of these things that you'll see, you've probably seen before. If you've been in the marketing world, we're standing on the shoulders of giants, as it says here. We draw on ideas from Ogilvy, the Golden Circle, Saatchi's Love Mark. So we're not reinventing the wheel, but we're definitely adding some spokes. Maybe you can think of it that way, with the overlay of data and machine learning that we'll be showing. So yeah, anything to add to that, Ed?
no, I just think this technology is important to try to understand and think through, because, as we all know, in the tourism industry, perfect example would be the introduction of virtual tours, even before COVID, right? It was probably 2014, 2015. If you were a first mover, so to speak, and you wanted to really grab the attention in terms of PR, you were testing those virtual tours on your website. And then, after 2, 3, 4, 5 years, it seemed to be the thing that every destination at least wanted to listen or seriously consider implementing. And so, I do think there's an advantage to being that first mover, being a destination that's willing to try some of these new technologies, because not only can it potentially give you that advantage, but when there's not a lot of other folks testing it or doing it, you're just gonna automatically be, considered an innovator and someone who is willing to try new things, and that typically attracts media coverage, which isn't a bad thing for our destinations.
Certainly, yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, and so like I mentioned, this is kind of a brand model that we've designed, and so what we want to do now is walk you guys through this. I don't know if we mentioned this, but if you have any questions for me, Ed, Mike, anyone, please post them in the chat and we'll answer them kind of as they come through. But before we get into kind of the tech side, right, which is super interesting, and that's part of what really excites us, we want to walk you through this branding model, because this is something that, whether you come and talk to us after this call or not, it's something you can take away and you can kind of reformat your brand and structure it in this way and see how you can track this, right? Because these are what we believe some of the key principles that make a brand, right? And it starts with the promise, right? This is the P in PTAI. This is the promise that a brand makes to the client. And the purpose of any brand is to fulfill that promise, sometimes called a mission. This is what we're gunning for as a brand. But within that promise, right, we can have multiple territories. And this, I think, is something Ed was alluding to. There's different areas in which we live as brands. We're not composed of a single thing, right? And we also can have different competitors across those different territories. If you're thinking in terms of innovation versus customer service, you could have different groups that you're competing with in those two regards, right, Ed?
Exactly. I mean, and that goes back to kind of my earlier point, when you feel like you just have so many interesting ingredients that make up your, recipe for your destination, but you can't necessarily highlight all of them. Well, which ones are most important? I think I know what they are in my head and in my gut, but you don't necessarily just want to take one person's opinion all the time. And if there's that additional insight that can help steer us in making the right decisions, all the better.
I think that's a great point, and that's often what you find. I mean, it's not to say that the tried and tested methodologies don't work, right? But there could be missed opportunities in the data, and we'll see later on in some examples. You'll be surprised, even with really well-known brands, what the actual most engaging aspects of the brand are to an audience. And that's an interesting example we have later on, but I think you hit the nail on the head there, Ed. The next part about this, and this is kind of, you can think of this so far as a pyramid. You have the promise, then you have your territories, and then within each territory, there are attributes. And the way we develop attributes and how we measure attributes are twofold, right? So a brand is composed of the conversation around it and what it is putting out there. And so this can be in the form of keywords, in comments, in posts, in replies, things like that, but also in visual features. And I know, Ed, this is something that really intrigued you. We're able to understand what features actually exist in images and tie those back to engagement, and understand which features are actually driving the most engagement and which attributes actually compose your brand, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, photography and imagery, as I'm sure the other people representing DMOs on the call know already, are so important. And again, we as leaders may think we know what the best image is, but why not listen more to what the customer or the visitor thinks? And, just to use a past experience, I'll never forget a meeting that I was in at the retailer Kohl's, which is headquartered in Wisconsin. I was there with a few other gentlemen from Converse, and we were given a presentation on the Chuck Taylor All-Stars. And this was back in the early 2000s, after we had just joined the organization when Nike purchased Converse out of bankruptcy, and it was considered a graveyard brand. And one of those early meetings, we were showing some of the iconic Chuck Taylor All-Star product to try to get big orders for this national chain. And we were showing them the black Chuck Taylor, the white, the navy, and a couple other different solid colors. And they basically said, we're not going to order any of this product because your brand is supposed to be fun. And all of our feedback that we know from customers is they're looking for more fun products. So we had to come back a few months later with all this new product with all kinds of crazy designs and drawings on all these Chuck Taylors. And they wound up placing big orders for all their retail locations. So it just goes to show you, gut decisions, I'm not saying they're not important, but it's really important to listen and understand the data more so than ever with making those creative decisions.
Yeah, that's an excellent anecdote, and I think it ties in perfectly to this. And yeah, relating back to what we discussed earlier, tried and true methodologies, they work, but that's not to say you can't figure out something that works even better, right? Or even bolsters the original methodology. So yeah, I think that's critical. And then this final point, kind of the I in PTAI, is the influencers. And when we're talking influencers here, we're not necessarily talking about what you know to be influencers on Instagram or something, people that are forming part of your marketing plan, though it can be that. But these are ambassadors. I think Ed alluded to a few for Discover Lancaster. But these are people that are proof that you're fulfilling your brand promise. And what we'll find is that these influencers also come from within the brand. People like Ed for Discover Lancaster, for example, and many of you on the call today, whether you know it or not, are influencers for your brand, right? The executives of a company kind of are the first champions. And so the information you're putting out there, how you're communicating to your audience, be it on LinkedIn, Twitter, anywhere, it has a direct impact on your brand. And we're going to see some examples of that later on an analysis we did towards the end of last year. which will be super interesting. But yeah, Ed, I don't know if you want to speak to this at all, the
Yeah,
impact
sure.
that this has.
Yeah, I mean, just the ambassadors in general. This topic takes me back to an interesting example from when I was working in marketing at the Under Armour headquarters, and it was around 2008. It was before the Summer Olympics, and the team was weighing whether or not to bring Michael Phelps onto the roster of endorsers. And what was very interesting about that period was the brand was looking to go international and expand in a big way. And he was about to go to Beijing. And what ultimately helped determine us to make the decision to sign him on a very lucrative contract, believe it or not, was his Twitter following. And we knew that if he were to go to Beijing and win a bunch of gold medals in China on this global stage, that an affiliation with Under Armour could really help expand the brand. So ambassadors, you hear about it a lot in sort of sports marketing, whether it's a LeBron James with a Nike, or Michael Phelps, or a Tom Brady with Under Armour. It could go on and on. It doesn't necessarily always have to be these big name celebrities. It can be people in the community who are just championing your destination, that can really help move the needle and bring in more followers.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great point, Ed. And as I'm reading this question from Lori, thank you, Lori. She asks, can executives armed with machine learning intelligence help their customer-facing staff to be better influencers, ambassadors? Absolutely, right? I think the findings we can gain from some of the tools we're going to show you in the second half of this call will demonstrate exactly that. And we can empower our executives to really learn how to be better influencers, right? Not just looking inwards, but also looking outwards at other influencers. And I think that's a cornerstone of the tool we're going to walk you through now. It's we're not just looking internally at what we do as a brand. We're also trying to learn not just from our competition, but also from other benchmark brands that we hold in high regard and aspire to be similar to. And so we can learn from even brands in different industries and how we can adapt ourselves to be more like them. Ed, I don't know if you wanted to mention something there or not. But what we, yeah, go ahead.
No, I didn't have anything specific, but something might come to me.
No worries, no worries. Yeah, so I think what we can do now, and I'll shut up for a bit. I'll let Mike kind of basically walk you guys through what the PTAI of Discover Lancaster is, because the hope is that you guys listening today can then take this and run with it, right? You can do a quick analysis of your own brand, see how it fits into this framework, and figure out where there might be potential holes or weaknesses, or where you have the strengths that you should be focusing on. And we're obviously going to get into how you can then track this if you're interested. So Mike, you can take it away.
Yeah, thank you. Hey guys. So my camera is not in the usual place for presentations. I'm going to try to look at the camera as much as possible, look at you guys as much as possible. So Ed kind of informally went through this PTAI framework with Lancaster. So his promise, the promise of Visit Lancaster, is to be the perfect blend of the old world and the new world. And then they have their territories. Amish is one of the first ones he mentioned. It's a beautiful Amish place to visit that you can't really get anywhere else. But you also have just tons of beautiful scenery. You have like the bed and breakfast, you have golfing, you have all the outdoor recreation. So these are all territories in Lancaster. Then you have the attributes that make up these territories. So the ones for Amish are pretty obvious. You have like horse and buggy, you have quilts, and you have farming. You also have the attributes for outdoor recreation, so golfing, all these like things that you could look for in social media, for example, these phrases, these words that make up those territories. What are people talking about? I want to point out the attributes don't necessarily have to be part of a territory. They can be off on their own. But the idea of PTAI is you want to identify your territories and try to focus on those attributes that you want to amplify and build up and own those territories. It makes your brand stronger. It makes people recognize your brand when they look at you. They know what you stand for. And then finally, we have influencers. So you can have these really big influencers like Ken Jennings, who had the Jeopardy winning streak. You can have smaller influencers too. And in fact, every person who interacts with your brand on social media or elsewhere, they're technically an influencer, maybe not very big, but they're amplifying your message. They're validating your credibility and your message. And so this is the whole PTAI pyramid, and it really starts from the bottom, from those people who are amplifying your message. They're talking about those attributes, they're building those territories, and they're fulfilling that brand promise.
Thanks so much, Mike. Ed, anything to add to that before you have to jump off?
No, I'm fascinated by this technology. I think that in a world where, we've gone from, reading paragraphs to reading short text messages to down to emojis, visuals are so important. And, pictures are worth 1,000 words, videos are worth 1,000 words. And I just think that our world has become more visual. And I'm most interested in seeing how I can understand more strategy around the decisions on what image to post on social media from day to day, or to refresh my website with, knowing that the decision on the type of image does have a big impact on the connections we make and the visitation we get at our destination. So yeah. Unfortunately, I have a hard stop because I have to go into a previously scheduled meeting, but I really appreciate you inviting me to weigh in, at least on my perspective.
Yeah, it's hugely valuable, and we thank you. I'm sure the audience learned a lot from your perspective. And so thanks again. Thanks again, Ed.
Yeah, I'm just going to do a shameless plug and ask everybody to come visit Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. Come to discoverlancaster.com and plan your next trip.
Yeah, do it.
All right, great. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Ed.
Thanks, Ed. See ya.
See ya.
Great. So now we're going to switch gears to what is the other side of this, as we welcome back Will. Hey, Will. We're going to talk now about the tech behind this, right? Because we've talked about kind of the theory, which is the PTAI, and the theory is built on the tech, but the tech also empowers the theory, as you'll see. And so Mike's going to walk you through kind of how we get this to work, and then we're going to dig into some really cool examples to show you all. So yeah, go ahead, cool. Mike.
So before I talk about the tech, I do want to mention the PTI framework can be used definitely without the tools or technology. So social media is kind of chaotic and overwhelming to analyze on your own, but it's possible. It's just like we have limited memory, and if you try to scroll through all your brand's posts and your own posts, it's going to become a blur. But you can at least make an attempt at it. You can try to do your promises for you and also competing brands. You can try to do the territories for competing brands. You can write all these things down, and it will help you inform your brand strategy. You can try to keep track of attributes too. So I highly encourage that. If nothing else today or in the future, you just try to do these things in an informal way. But now let's talk about the technology behind it. So go on next, please. We can do these things in a data-driven way with a tool called Brack, which is data-driven brand tracker. And so it's gathering a lot of data and using machine learning to create trackability. So the idea of Brack is to turn big data into differentiation and relevance through PTAI. Why do we feel like we need to put machine learning into everything? And it's because it enables much more trackability. So we have this huge volume of social media text that's feels chaotic and hard to keep track of, but with machine learning, we can turn it into territories. We can have like a model just tell us what the territories are. We can do vision analysis on the images. So before, an image maybe wasn't that useful. It wasn't really like a data point, but now we have features from it. And we can get the sentiment of each phrase. We can get the syntax, what words are making up phrases. All these things together help us be methodical. And that's really the key. Is it's really hard to be methodical in life, especially in something like this. And being methodical helps us capture people's attention and their love and their loyalty when building a brand.
Hey, Michael, for a simple person that doesn't know, can barely program a computer, can barely, work through my normal laptop. But let me just ask a simple question. So we're talking about all this big data. So I'm a destination, and all of a sudden I do my PTAI framework. I understand what those words are. We're out scouring all social media to find out who's talking about us and what those words, how they're talking about us. So instead of kind of Ed's point of saying my gut feeling of here's what my destination brand is, you're out there finding what everybody else that we don't even know who they are, but what they're saying about our brand, right? And then we're able to do that in there. And they're telling us, so what machine learning enables us to not just track how many likes we get or how many followers we have. This is allowing us to track who's talking about us across the whole world. And there's that one chart that's out there that shows what sick amount of minutes are spent, how many people are spending so much time on social media, or how many videos are uploaded to YouTube every minute. So you're able to plug into all that stuff, find out what other people are saying about us. So it's kind of the old adage of, branding. We think it's what we're sticking on the cow, but in reality, it's what everybody else is saying about us.
I think that's exactly it. And something I was about to highlight, Will, and it's that we often have this perception of our brand, and we'll build our PTI framework with this notion of what our brand is and what we're thinking we're putting out there. And oftentimes, as Mike mentioned, we can do this analysis, analyze what territories pop up. And pretty much every time we've done this, we've seen territories that the brand wasn't aware of. So things that are being discussed, conversations that are being had about a brand that the brand is not either capitalizing on or not trying to fix. It's really marvelous, like the things you can start to kind of get from this sort of information.
So Maurizio, give me an idea of the scale. Like, I mean, when you do this for this, how many pieces of information are we tapping in?
Yeah, I know that's a great question. And so we're going to get into kind of like the components of this, or Mike's going to get into it. But really, we're getting all of the posts, not just from our brand, but also from all the designated competitors and benchmark brands that we're interested in. And so you can think of a benchmark brand as I mentioned, Coca-Cola, eBay, Google, whoever you want that you think, Netflix, that puts himself out there in a good light. But then you also have your direct competitors. So we would get all their posts, but also all the comments and all of the replies. And so that starts to build a huge, huge corpus of text and information that we can then draw upon to understand what is the layout of not just our brand, but our competitors. And so where are there holes in what our competitors are doing that we can kind of take over? Where are there things that they're doing well that we can also emulate? And we can track all of this, right? So we can say, this is where we're at today on July 14th. How are we at tomorrow, or in a month, or in a year? We can see how we're progressing, and you can put material value and numbers against the performance of a brand. I don't know if that answers your question, but it's a lot of data. You're on mute.
You're muted.
The point is, it's an awful lot more than anything that we have on our own independently.
Certainly, and it's a lot more than
more information.
Yeah, and it's a lot more than any one human can make sense of on their own, at least practically speaking. These are tools that are built for this. And so in this particular case, they'll do a better job than humans. That's not to say that we don't need humans to interpret these results, action on them, and actually make them like feel real. This is just giving us kind of that input to further our brands. And yeah, I don't know if it's the next slide, but I won't get ahead of myself. I'll let Mike walk through the tech because we get into a little more of what comprises this technology. So next slide, right, Mike?
Yeah, that works. Thank you. So yeah, let's talk about the image analysis that we've mentioned a few times using machine learning. And this is really important because up to 80% of all of our perception as humans is through our sight. And so like the vision is extremely important in how you're perceived as a brand or in any case. So go on next, please. So we're really lucky nowadays in 2021 that we can have a machine learning model that is able to take an image and extract out the features. It's pretty cool. So this is an example of a machine learning model that recognizes what's in the picture and has like a confidence for each thing it sees. So it sees two people it's pretty sure of, it sees a tree, it sees a lake, a boat, all these things. So before we didn't have, with just an image, it's not really a useful piece of data that we can like mass process. But now we have a whole lot of data from just this one image. It's worth 1,000 words, you might say.
So Michael, this reminds me of, I don't, did you ever read the book Blink, Malcolm Gladwell's book Blink?
I've read bits of it.
All right, so the whole concept is that, like, if you're shopping for a car and all of a sudden you like the new Volkswagen, well, you never paid attention to it until you decided that you might like the Volkswagen. Then you feel like you see one everywhere you go, because we're as humans, we see 10,000 different messages a day, and so your mind just naturally blanks all that stuff out. And the same kind of thing happens in marketing, right? If the algorithms are only showing you something, a limited amount of what's about your destination, and the algorithms are only giving you a little bit, and you only pay attention to a little bit of that anyway, this is allowing you to break through all that clutter and identify everything that's out there and get a totality of it versus just some slim piece that either an algorithm's giving you or you're naturally kind of blanking out.
Yeah, it's really funny you bring that up, because I was actually just reading yesterday. There's kind of an inverse to this 80% number. So 80% of what we perceive is through vision, but of that vision that comes through, about 20% of it is what we're actually seeing. The other 80% is coming from preconceived notions of what our brain is expecting to see. So that's why branding and advertising is so important, is because it primes people's minds for what they expect to see. So their mind fills in that other 80% of what they saw. Super cool. So here's we don't necessarily need this if it's not going to work.
Yeah, I don't know why that's not working. Yeah, you want me to skip it?
Yeah, let's just skip it. All it was like a video showing an Instagram profile, and it shows the machine learning processing on the images, getting out the features, and then adding all the data together to form the high level view of the brand of their Instagram profile. What are the features that are making up that Instagram profile? Like whether it's buildings or people or ice cream, what are the features that are prominent on that profile?
Yeah, thanks, Mike.
It was a fun visual.
Sorry about that, guys. Not sure what happened with it. Let's see.
No worries. So I already mentioned social media a little bit earlier. The reason that we're focusing on social media as a data source is because it's accessible and low barrier. And that's something that's a challenge for every company, but for DMOs, it's especially a challenge. Is they're working with a lot of different partners, and it's just overwhelming to be able to get good data on destinations. So social media, everybody has access to it. We have connections to these platforms, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, LinkedIn, and Google Reviews. We pull all those together into Google Cloud. We do machine learning processing. We aggregate all the data. We stitch it up together into a nice dashboard that is real time, and you can view every single day. The idea of the dashboard is that you can make like daily branding decisions about what content you want to put out, everything that we'll be discussing in upcoming slides. You can move on unless you want to add something, Maurizio.
Yeah, no, I just want to highlight, because this kind of relates back to the question Will asked earlier about kind of the range of data that we're capturing. And so from these platforms, I want to stress we're getting our information, but also our competitors. This is all public data, so it's available freely. And then the comments that are being posted publicly to those profiles. And so we're really getting a sense of us and our competition, which I think is oftentimes like even harder to acquire, right? Is that view of what is the rest doing? And then that can help drive even further differentiation, because we understand what they're doing, and we can either decide to actively try to occupy one of their existing territories or go in a different direction, depending on the strategy.
So another question, you mentioned that this is in real time on a dashboard. So again, we've gone through as a travel industry a year unlike any other, but assuming you had this methodology in place and the machine learning and tracking social messages of our brand and what people are saying, presumably then we would have been able to see kind of almost in real time what people were saying again around COVID or around resident sentiment or, around diversity, equity, inclusion issues that were so very important in 2020 and this year as well, but were really new to the travel industry in a lot of ways. So I'm guessing that this is going to provide you almost real time kind of insight into what consumers are thinking about our brand rather than relying on a survey or something like that.
That's exactly right. Well, yeah, I don't need to expand further because you just described it.
I'm just a simple guy trying to figure it out.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you for that very clear explanation.
It's funny. One of our biggest clients is a global med tech company using this style of tool. And they were in the early days of the pandemic, it was really helpful getting the real-time updates on COVID and moving quickly.
Yeah. So this is kind of how these two things play together, right? We have this strategic framework and it's feeding the technology, right? It feeds how we're analyzing the information, but then that information can then go back and empower that framework, and it can empower us to better understand our brand and better position our brand. So like I mentioned, you might go home now and create your own PTI framework for your brand. And if you come and do some sort of analysis like what we're doing with Brack, you may find that there's some missing pieces there, right, to your puzzle. Some opportunities, some challenges. There's an interesting anecdote about a company that mined their Google reviews data. It wasn't even a company, it was I think it was a DMO, if I'm not mistaken, and from there was able to determine that a lot of the bathrooms were an issue in certain locations, and so or the elevators, or basically from there you can, I think it was the elevators, right, Mike?
Yeah, it was elevators.
The elevators were an issue, and so there was only one elevator repair shop, so they knew that they needed to get another one because everyone was complaining about elevators when they visited.
Yeah, that was Myrtle Beach, actually, and
Myrtle Beach. That's what it was
at eTourism Summit. But the power, I think that's a great kind of a great example of the power of insight that's available and the depth of insight that's available through machine learning. That there is no way you're ever going to get that. You're never going to get the input even from your partners direct. That, oh man, that's I can't get my elevators repaired. It's a real problem. But just by tracking Google reviews and all the available data, they were able to pull that out. So, I mean, that's kind of an operational issue versus a brand issue, but it does kind of deal with, again, in a marketplace that's changing so fast, and in a brand ecosystem where everybody is pretty solid, with their brand positioning for the last 10 years or so, that the market is changing so fast. Just to know where you sit for real in real time as things happen, I think is just a really, really cool opportunity. I have one question for you, and I'm sure I'm screwing up the presentation. And
no,
not, but if I start to make adjustments to my messaging and my positioning, am I able to track kind of, again, how that is impacting the global conversation around a brand, PTAI component?
Yeah, Mike, do you want to take that, or?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, that's the idea of having this interaction between Brack and PTAI, is that you can see your promise grow over time. You can actually track that metric. You can see your territories grow over time. If there's a territory you want to get rid of, you can see that shrink over time. And you can do that at the granular level by looking at the attributes that make up those territories and make up your brand promise. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, it absolutely does. And I guess the other question I have, and this is something that has been circulating in the, it's just a challenge in tourism marketing, and it goes back to the image that you just shared of going in and actually analyzing images, is what other people are sharing about us. I mean, I think that's always been the kind of the holy grail, is how do we get other people to tell our story for us? And I mean, that's very different of what images people are sharing of our destination than kind of what we're thinking about, or even market positioning. That whole imagery component is huge. And that's so much more than just hiring influencers to push pretty pictures out for you.
Certainly, and actually that's a really interesting point that you mentioned, because as we know, probably the premier platform for sharing images is Instagram. And what we've done with a couple clients is not only analyze our brand's performance, but also hashtag performance. So we can get public, of course, images that are posted with our brand hashtags and see what people are posting about us from a visual perspective. And so beyond seeing what replies we're getting to our content, we can see what actual images people are sharing about us, and what gets people excited when they come visit Lancaster or Myrtle Beach or wherever. We can see that by following on these hashtags. So yeah, really powerful stuff there.
And then you'd be able to kind of look and see this is the imagery that we're putting out as
Exactly.
a destination, and here's all the imagery that's being put out by everybody else, and how much are they similar, or how much are they different?
Exactly right. That's exactly it. Yep. And so with that, I know we have questions about whether this works, and that we can't share specific examples. We do have this quick visual we want to share with you guys. We have a client. We started working with them back in September of last year. And basically from this, you can see the average for the category in terms of engagement score, which is a KPI that we generate. It tells us how engaging a brand is being. And when we look at the trend here, we can see that the average monthly growth for the category was very static. It was almost zero. It was at 300 engagement per month, while our client was able to increase 30 times this on a monthly rate in terms of getting their brand out there, and actually by the end surpassing the category average. So it works. This isn't a DMO, but it works, and it can certainly be expanded to any industry, really. And we're especially passionate about travel and tourism, which is why we're here today, if that isn't abundantly clear by now. So yeah, the next thing we want to do is show you this in action. Mike's going to walk you through a couple examples that we have. We might need to pick up the pace and speed through a bit, so excuse us if we skip over some names and things that are interesting to you. You can always reach out to us. One important thing to know is that all the visuals you're about to see here in this presentation, they're static, like for the sake of convenience, but these all exist in live real-time dashboards. If we have time at the end, we're going to show you one of them. And yeah, these are just kind of examples of how PTAI and Brack really come together, and you can start getting this insight. So go ahead, Mike.
Cool, thank you, thank you. So we're going to go through this in order of PTAI. And remember, promise is the promise to the client, and the brand has the purpose of fulfilling that promise. And Dove is a great example here, because their promise is crystal clear. It's to make beauty a source of confidence and not anxiety, and that's through the celebration of real beauty. We can go next. So we're going to compare that to a brand like Ollie in the next slide. This is the really high level promise, which we call brand love. And everything is, all the attributes and territories together are coming together and aggregated into this brand love. And we can see that Dove's promise is abundantly clear here. Like they're the strongest in promise in brand love. Next, we can do territories. So remember, these are things like for Lancaster, it'd be like outdoor recreation and Amish, stuff like that. Here we're looking at Dove still and Ollie. On the left, or on this chart, Dove and Ollie both have a really similar average engagement per post. So whenever they post, they tend to get about the same engagement. But for the territory of self-care, we see that Dove is super excelling. They're owning this category against all of their competitors. Ollie is doing decent, but they're nowhere near Dove. And you can, I mean, Dove focuses on this territory, and it really shows through the data. So still in territories, we can look at Delta versus Alaska. And this time on the left, we have the territory of love traveling in this chart. And Delta is a little bit low in this territory of love traveling. Alaska Air is doing pretty well. And this is always interesting to see because Alaska Air, if you look at that top left pie chart, you see Alaska Air actually only has 25% of the posts, 25% of the share of voice, but their average engagement per post is so high, they're outperforming Delta there. Their share of engagement is half and half. So on the right side, we see diversity, equity, and inclusion territory, and that's the place that Delta seems to be focused on because their territory is much stronger there. It's on par with Alaska Air.
Just to add, I think here it's important to note that although Delta in DEI is slightly below Alaska Air, we can tell based on their both their share of voice and share of engagement, this is something they're dominating, right? They're talking about this a lot, they're engaging a lot, and it shows in their average engagement per post. So this is how you can kind of start seeing you versus your competition, how you're performing in these different territory areas, right?
Yeah, thanks for that. Again, I was thinking to skip this example anyways, but anyways.
We have a visual on the next one, I think.
Yeah, we have pretty much the same visual, a portion of it. So we're talking about attributes now, and these are the things that make up territories. Your attributes don't necessarily have to belong to a territory, but like we said earlier, you generally want your attributes that you focus on to be part of a territory that you want to own. So we see some syntax, we see some words that Delta Airlines uses on the left, and these are all like general category chatter, and we see this often when we do all kinds of categories, all kinds of industries. We see just like general chatter. But on the right, with Alaska Air, we see like a really unique term, Alaska Safety Dance. And that's like a term that Alaska Air is owning. And it's strengthening their love traveling territory and the fun spiritedness of the brand.
Thanks, Mike. I think we're gonna skip over a few of these just in the interest of time. Here we just have T-Mobile and Netflix comparison of visual features. I think this one's especially pertinent, so Mike, we can discuss this if you want. Looking at NYC and Visit Austin.
Yeah. So these are features extracted from images. And for the top, we have New York City. All the images were analyzed, and we found that the top feature by engagement, average engagement, was fog. So you can imagine if you're like scrolling over all the images that make up the NYC brand, that you might walk away at least remembering fog, and that people are engaging with those pictures. They like them. And then, did you want to add anything else to that, Maurizio?
No. Just, yeah, that these are like things that stand out even in Visit Austin. Like we see biome and things like snow and winter generating engagement for a place like Austin, which is kind of hard to believe, but it's what the data is showing us.
Yeah.
And the next example, I think. Yeah,
if you go through this list of like top features, even like a page or two in, you'll find some really interesting features that you can riff off of.
Yeah. And so in this example, we kind of want you guys to guess. We're running short on time, but if you want to go ahead and explain this, Mike.
Yeah, so basically the examples you just saw for Walt Disney World, what do you think the top average engaging feature is from the images for Walt Disney World?
So if you want to post in chat, go ahead and give us your guess. But yeah, you'd think something. Did you say castle, Will?
I guess the castle.
Yeah, the castle or the fireworks, right? Like that's what makes or Mickey Mouse.
Yeah, Mickey Mouse.
These are things that make Disney stand out. Let's see what guess. Mickey Mouse. Yeah, Rhonda, exactly. These are the things we expect to see from Disney, but in reality, what is driving the highest engagement for Disney? It's food, right? It's these pictures of delicious treats that they sell at their locations. And yeah, we see building, right? Building, leisure, worlds, like trees, clouds, but food is standing above all else in terms of performance. And so these are the kinds of things that even for a brand like Disney, that you'd expect to be comprised of these like key elements, they're being driven by something else entirely. And this could be the case, and we see it frequently for any brand. And so that's why it's important to build your PTAI, but also know what's actually out there. What is your true PTAI, so to speak? Right, Mike?
Yeah.
So quickly, I don't think we're going to have time to go into the dashboard, unfortunately, but we do want to show you this. We can kill summer flogging and stuff. Very funny, Lori. So we basically did this analysis using Forbes top 50 global CMOs, some of which are represented here. So these were big names that Forbes put out there in their ranking. And so we were interested naturally, what makes these people, this group of extraordinary people, so special in terms of what their discussion is. Because we already know that executives, marketing executives specifically as well, are keys to their brand. They're influencers, as we mentioned, as part of the PTAI. And so we built this dashboard using data for all of 2020 from LinkedIn, which you can go to using this bit.ly link at your own leisure after the call and experiment with it. But to understand what are the things that are happening with these top CMOs that make them so special, right? And we find also who the most engaging CMOs actually were. So going back, though, Fernando Machado was ranked number 3 in terms of average engagement for Burger King, he's number 1, right? And we see other very interesting personalities and executives show up in this list. But using Fernando as an example, we can see why, right? He's using his personal brand as an influencer to propel his company's brand. So if you guys are on LinkedIn, you've probably seen this go viral, had over 70,000 likes, the Order from McDonald's campaign in the midst of the pandemic, or who can forget the Moldy Whopper, or when Tiger King was all the rage, right? So these are things that Fernando is using to further propel the brand that is Burger King. And unfortunately, we don't have time, but we did a very similar analysis for the top leaders in the DMO world. And this was truly interesting to us because we were able to find some key, as I get some key topics and some key territories and some key people in the industry. And yeah, I think, I don't know if you just share that to just the panelists or the attendees, Becca, but this is something we can definitely circle back on when we're at ETS Live. And that's, I believe, in September. So just to wrap up, right, because we've discussed a lot, we have this PTI framework. We hope that you all can kind of go back, and even if you don't do it physically, it's got you thinking about what is my PTAI, right? But really the crux of this is that you have to have something that can help empower that PTAI. And whether it's us or not, we really encourage you to find ways, novel ways to make use of all this information that's out there, because it really is what's going to ultimately be the difference. As Ed mentioned, early movers in these spaces are typically gaining significant ground and getting an advantage. And so we're very fortunate to be here with you today. We're very happy to have presented this to you. If you have any questions at all, be it about this or about the data science stuff that we talked about at the top, please don't hesitate to reach out to us with any questions or comments. Our account is there, hello@crant.ai. And we'd be happy to meet with you, chat, whatever you guys want. We're here for you. So thank you again. Thank you to Ed, even though he's not here anymore. Thank you, Will, Becca, everyone at ETS. We're really happy, and we hope that you all enjoyed this time and this talk.
Maurizio, Mike, thank you so much for that. And we're definitely looking forward to seeing the analysis of the top 50 DMO leaders and their engagement. I will give you a little teaser that our friend Ed Harris from Visit Lancaster today came in at number 5 out of all the top 50 leaders in terms of engagement. So we'll be focusing on that at eTourism Summit September in Las Vegas, and certainly we'll have a good story about the engagement scores and what we were able to pull from a very small piece of data just in LinkedIn. But the power that it has. So it's my feeling that while location data has been kind of the golden child for the last couple of years and will remain very, very important, I think the utilization of machine learning is going to really be a key factor in destination marketing moving forward. So thank you for sharing an hour with us. We look forward to seeing you again in Las Vegas, and all the best to everybody that joined us today. We'll talk to you again in 2 weeks.
Thank you, Will. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.